Chapter 7. A Visitor for Bertie. The attitude of fellows towards finding girls in their bedroom shortly after midnight varies. Some like it, some don't. I didn't. I suppose it's some old Puritan strain in the Wooster blood. I drew myself up censoriously and shot a sternish glance in her direction, absolutely wasted, of course, because it was pitch dark. What? What? It's all right. All right? Quite all right? Oh, I said, and I don't pretend to disguise the fact that I spoke bitterly. I definitely meant it to sting. I stooped to pick up the candle, and the next moment I'd uttered a startled cry. "Don't make so much noise!" "But there's a corpse on the floor!" "There isn't. I should have noticed it." "There is, I tell you. I was groping about for the candle, and my fingers touched something cold and still and clammy." "Oh, that's my swimming suit." "Your swimming suit? Well, do you think I came ashore by aeroplane?" "You swam here from the yacht?" "Yes." "When?" "About half an hour ago." In that level-headed, practical way of mine, I went straight to the root of the matter. "Why?" I asked. A match scratched, and a candle by the bed flamed up and lent a bit of light to the scene. Once more I was able to observe those pyjamas, and I'm bound to admit they looked extraordinarily dressy. Pauline was darkish in her general colour scheme, and heliotrope suited her. I said as much, always being ready to give credit where credit is due. "You look fine in that slumber-wear." "Thanks." She blew out the match and gazed at me in a sort of wondering way. "You know, Bertie, steps should be taken about you." "Huh?" "You ought to be in some sort of home." "I am," I replied coldly and rather cleverly. "My own. The point I wish to thresh out is, what are you doing in it?" Woman-like, she evaded the issue. "What on earth did you want to kiss me like that for in front of Father? You needn't tell me you were carried away by my radiant beauty. No, it was just plain, straight goofiness. And I can quite understand now why Sir Roderick told Father that you ought to be under restraint. Why are you still at large? You must have a pull of some kind." "We Woosters are pretty sharp on this kind of thing." I spoke with a good deal of asperity. "The incident to which you allude is readily explained. I thought he was chuffy." "Thought who was chuffy?" "Your father. If you're trying to make out that Marmaduke looks the least bit like Father, you must be cuckoo," she replied with a warmth equal to my own. I gathered that she was not a great admirer of the parent's appearance, and I'm not saying that she wasn't right. "Besides, I don't see what you mean." I explained. "The idea was to let Chuffy observe you in my embrace, so that the generous fire would be stirred within him, and he'd get keyed up to proposing to you, feeling that if he didn't get action right speedily, he might lose you." Her manner softened. "You didn't think that out by yourself?" "I did." I was somewhat nettled. "Why everybody should imagine that I can't get ideas without the assistance of Jeeves." "But that was very sweet of you." "We Woosters are sweet, exceedingly sweet when a pal's happiness is in the balance." "I can see now why I accepted you that night in New York," she said meditatively. "There's a sort of woolly-headed duckiness about you. If I wasn't so crazy about Marmaduke, I could easily marry you, Bertie." No, I said with some alarm. "Don't dream of it. I mean to say—" "Oh, it's all right. I'm not going to. I'm going to marry Marmaduke. That's why I'm here." "And now," I said, "we've come right back to it. Once more we've worked around to the very point concerning which I most desire enlightenment. What on earth is the idea behind all this? You say you swam ashore from the yacht. Why? You came and dumped yourself in my little home. Why?" "Because I wanted somewhere to lie low till I could get clothes, of course. I can't go to the hall in a swimming suit." I began to follow the train of thought. "Oh, you swam ashore to get to Chuffy. Of course. Father was keeping me a prisoner on board the yacht, and this evening your man Jeeves—" I winced. "My late man. All right, your late man. Your late man Jeeves arrived with an early letter from Marmaduke." "Oh, boy." "How do you mean, oh, boy? Was that a letter? I cried 6 pints when I read it. Hot stuff? It was beautiful. It throbbed with poetry." "It did?" "Yes." "This letter?" "Yes." "Chuffy's letter?"
Yes, you seem surprised.
I was a bit. One of the very best, old Chuffy, of course, but I wouldn't have said he could write letters like that. But then one has got to take into consideration the fact that when I've been with him, he's generally been eating steak and kidney pudding, or cursing horses for not running fast enough. On such occasions, the poetic side of a man is not uppermost. So this letter stirred you up, did it?
You bet it stirred me up. I felt I couldn't wait another day without seeing him. What was that poem about a woman wailing for her demon lover?
Ah, there you have me. Jeeves would know.
Well, that's what I felt like. And talking of Jeeves, what a man! Sympathy, he drips with it.
Oh, you confided in Jeeves?
Yes, and told him what I was going to do.
And he didn't try to stop you?
Stop me? He was all for it.
He was he?
You should have seen him. Such a kind smile. He said you'd be delighted to help me.
He did, eh?
He spoke most highly of you.
Really?
Oh, yes, he thinks a lot of you. I remember his very words. Mr. Wooster, miss, he said, is perhaps mentally somewhat negligible, but he has a heart of gold. He said that as he was lowering me from the side of the boat by a rope, having first made sure that the coast was clear, I couldn't dive, you see, because of the splash. I was chewing the lip in some chagrin. What the devil did he mean, mentally negligible?
Oh, you know, loopy.
Cha!
Huh?
I said, cha.
Why?
Why? I was a great deal moved.
Well, wouldn't you say cha if your late man was going about the place telling people you were mentally negligible?
But with a heart of gold.
Never mind the heart of gold. The point is that my man, my late man, a fellow I've always looked on more as some sort of an uncle than a personal attendant, is shooting to and fro, bellowing out at the top of his voice that I'm mentally negligible, and filling my bedroom with girls.
Bertie, are you annoyed?
Annoyed?
You sound annoyed, and I can't see why. I should have thought you would have been only too glad of the chance of helping me to get the man I love. Having this heart of gold I hear so much about.
The point is not whether I have a heart of gold. Heaps of people have hearts of gold, and yet would be upset at finding girls in their bedrooms in the small hours. What you don't seem to realize, what you and this Jeeves of yours have omitted to take into your calculations, is that I have a reputation to keep up, an unspotted name to maintain in its pristine purity. This cannot be done by entertaining girls who come in the middle of the night without so much as a by your leave and coolly pinch your heliotrope pajamas.
You didn't expect me to sleep in a wet swimming suit?
And leap into your bed. She uttered an exclamation.
I know what this reminds me of. I've been trying to think ever since you came in. The story of the 3 bears. You must have been told it as a kid. There's somebody in my bed. Wasn't that what the big bear said?
I frowned doubtfully. As I recollect it, it was something about porridge. Who's been eating my porridge?
I'm sure there was a bed in it.
Bed? Bed? I can't remember any bed. On the subject of the porridge, however, I am absolutely... But we're wandering from the point once more. What I was saying was that a reputable bachelor like myself, who has never had his license so much as endorsed, can scarcely be blamed for looking askance at girls in heliotrope pajamas in his bed.
You said they suited me.
They do suit you.
You said I looked fine in them.
You do look fine in them, but once more you're refusing to meet the issue squarely. The point is...
How many points is that? I seem to have counted about a dozen.
There is only one point, and I'm endeavouring to make it clear. In a nutshell, what will people say when they find you here?
But they won't find me here.
You think so? Ha! What about Brinkley?
Who's he?
My man.
Your late man?
I clicked my tongue. My new man. At 9 tomorrow morning he'll bring me tea.
Well, you like that.
He'll bring it to this room. He will approach the bed. He will place it on the table.
What on earth for?
To facilitate my getting at the cup and sipping.
Oh, you mean he'll put the tea on the table. You said he would put the bed on the table.
I never said anything of the sort.
You did, distinctly.
I tried to reason with the girl. My dear child, I said, I must really ask you to use your intelligence. Brinkley is not a juggler. He's a well-trained gentleman's gentleman, and would consider it a liberty to put beds on tables. And why should he put beds on tables? The idea would never occur to him. She interrupted my reasoning.
But wait a minute. You keep babbling about Brinkley, but there isn't a Brinkley. There is a Brinkley, one Brinkley, and one Brinkley coming into this room at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and finding you in that bed will be enough to start a scandal which will stagger humanity. I mean, he can't be in the house. Of course he's in the house. Well, he must be deaf then. I made enough noise getting in to wake 6 gentlemen's gentlemen, apart from smashing a window at the back. Did you smash a window at the back? I had to, or I couldn't have got in. It was the window of some sort of bedroom on the ground floor. Why, dash it, that's Brinkley's bedroom. Well, he wasn't in it. Why on earth not? I gave him the evening off, not the night. I can see what's happened. He's away on a toot somewhere, and won't be back for days. Father had a man who did that once. He went out for his evening from our house on East 67th Street, New York, on April the 4th, in a bowler hat, grey gloves, and a check suit, and the next we heard of him was a telegram for Portland, Oregon, on April the 10th, saying he'd overslept himself and would be back shortly. That's what your Brinkley must have done. I must say I drew a good deal of comfort from the idea. Let's hope so, I said. If he's really trying to drown his sorrows, it ought to take him weeks. So you see, you've been making a fuss about nothing. I always say... But what it was, she always said, I was not privileged to learn. For at that moment she broke off with a sharp squeak. Somebody was knocking on the front door. Chapter 8. Police Persecution. We looked at each other with a wild surmise, silent upon a first-floor back in Chufnell Regis. That frightful sound, coming unexpectedly like that in the middle of the peaceful summer night, had been enough to strike the chit-chat from anybody's lips. And what rendered it so particularly unpleasant to us, personally, was the fact that we'd both jumped simultaneously to the same ghastly conclusion. "It's father," Pauline gargled, and with a swift flip of her finger she doused the candle. "What did you do that for?" I said, a good deal pipped. The sudden darkness seemed to make things worse. "So that he shouldn't see a light in the window, of course. If he thinks you're asleep, he may go away." "What a hope!" I retorted, as the knocking, which had eased off for a moment, started again with more follow-through than ever. "Well, I suppose you'd better go down," said the girl in a subdued sort of voice. "Or," she seemed to brighten, "shall we pour water on him from the staircase window?" I started violently. She had made the suggestion as if she considered it one of her best and brightest, and I suddenly realized what it meant to play the host to a girl of her temperament and personality. All that I'd ever heard or read about the reckless younger generation seemed to come back to me. "Don't dream of it," I whispered urgently. "Dismiss the project utterly and absolutely from your mind." I mean to say, a dry J. Washburn-Stoker seeking an errant daughter was bad enough. A J. Washburn-Stoker stimulated to additional acerbity by a jugful of H2O on his head, I declined to contemplate. Goodness knows, I wasn't keen on going down and passing the time of night with a man, but if the alternative was to allow his loved one to drench him to the skin and then wait while he tore the walls down with his bare hands, I proposed to do so immediately. "I'll have to see him," I said. "Well, be careful." "How do you mean, careful?" "Oh, just careful. Still, of course, he may not have a gun." I swallowed a trifle. "What exactly would you say the odds were, for and against?" She mused a while. "I'm trying to remember if father is a southerner or not." "A what?" "I know he was born at a place called Carterville, but I can't recollect if it was Carterville, Kentucky, or Carterville, Massachusetts." "What the dickens difference does it make?" "Well, if you smirch the honor of a southerner's family, he's apt to shoot." "Would your father consider it smirched the family honor your being here?" "Bound to, I should think." I couldn't help agreeing with her. It did seem to me offhand that a purist might consider the smirching pretty good, but I hadn't time to weigh the point, because the knocker got going again with renewed vim. "Well, dash it," I said. "Wherever this ghastly parent of yours was born, I shall have to go down and talk to him. That door will be splitting asunder soon." "Don't get closer to him than you can help." "I won't." "He was a great wrestler when he was a young man." "You needn't tell me any more about your father." "I only meant I wouldn't let him get hold of you if you can help." "Is there anywhere I can hide?" "No." "Why not?" "I don't know why not," I replied, a little curtly. "They don't build these country cottages with secret rooms and underground passages. When you hear me open the front door, stop breathing." you want me to suffocate? Well, of course, a Wooster doesn't put such thoughts into words, but I'm bound to say this struck me as a jolly good idea. Forbearing the reply, I hurried down the stairs and flung open the front door. Well, when I say flung, I opened it a matter of 6 inches, not omitting to keep it on the chain. "Hello?" I said. "Yes?" I don't know when I felt such a chunk of relief as surged over me the next moment. "Oi!" said a voice. "Taking your time, haven't you? What's the matter with you, young man? Deaf or something?" It wasn't in its essentials a musical voice, being on the thick side and a shade rupee. If I'd been its owner, I'd have given more than a little thought to the subject of tonsils. But it had one supreme merit which outweighed all its defects. It wasn't the voice of J. Washburn Stoker. "Frightfully sorry," I said. "I was thinking of this and that, sort of reverie, if you know what I mean." The voice spoke again, not without a pretty goodish modicum of suavity this time. "Oh, I beg your pardon, sir. I thought you was the young man Brinkley." "Brinkley's out," I said, feeling that if he ever returned I would have a word to say to him about the hours at which his pals paid social calls. "Who are you?" "Sergeant Vowles, sir." I opened the door. It was pretty dark outside, but I could recognize the arm of the law all right. This Vowles was a bird built rather on the lines of the Albert Hall, round in the middle and not much above. He almost looked to me as if nature had really intended to make 2 police sergeants and had forgotten to split them up. "Ah, Sergeant," I said, careless, debonair, not a thing on Bertram's mind, you would have supposed, but his hair. "Anything I can do for you, Sergeant?" My eyes were getting accustomed to the darkness by this time, and I was able to spot certain objects of interest by the wayside. The principal one was another policeman, tall and lean and stringy, this one. "This is my young nephew, sir, Constable Dobson." Well, I wasn't exactly in the mood for a social reunion, and I could have wished that the sergeant, if he wanted to make me one of the family and all pals together, so to speak, had selected some other time. But I inclined the bean gracefully in the constable's direction and uttered a kindly, "Ah, Dobson." I rather think, if I remember, that I also said something about its being a fine night. But apparently this wasn't just one of those chummy gatherings which recall the old-time salon. "Are you aware, sir, that there's a window broke at the back of your residence? My young nephew here spotted it, and thought best to wake me up and have me investigate. A ground-floor window, sir, with a whole pane of glass gone from it." I simpered slightly. "Oh, that, yes, Brinkley did that yesterday, silly ass." "You knew about it then, sir?" Oh, yes, quite all right, Sergeant." "Well, you know best if it's quite all right, sir, but I should say there was a danger of marauders getting through." And at this juncture the chump of a constable, who had hitherto not spoken, shoved his oar in. "I thought I did see a marauder getting through, Uncle Ted." "What? Then why didn't you tell me before, you young muttonhead? And don't call me Uncle Ted when we're on duty." "No, Uncle Ted." "You'd best let us make a search of the house, sir," said Sergeant Vowles. Well, I put the presidential veto on this pretty quick. "Certainly not, Sergeant," I said. "Quite out of the queue." "It would be wiser, sir." "I'm sorry," I said, "but it can't be done." He seemed piqued and discontented. "Well, please yourself, sir. But you're shackling the police. That's what you're doing. There's too much shackling of the police these days. There was a piece in the Mail about it yesterday. Perhaps you read it?" "No." "On the middle page, 'Unshackle the police,' it said, because public alarm is growing in Great Britain owing to the continuous increase of crime in the lonely rural districts. I clipped it out to paste it in my album. The number of indictable offences, it said, has rose from 134581 in 1929 to 147031 in 1930, with a marked increase of 7% in crimes of violence. And is this disturbing state of things due to slackness on the part of the police, it said? No, it said, it's not. It's because the police are shackled." The man was obviously cut to the quick, dashed awkward. "Well, I'm sorry," I said. "Yes, sir. And you're going to be sorrier when you go upstairs to your bedroom and a marauder cuts your throat from ear to ear. Fight against these gloomy views, my dear old police sergeant, I said. I anticipate no such contingency. I've just come from upstairs, and I give you my word there were no marauders.
Probably lurking, sir.
Biding their time, suggested Constable Dobson. Sergeant Vowles sighed heavily.
I wouldn't like nothing to happen to you, sir, seeing you're a close friend of his lordship's, but as you prove obdurate...
Oh, nothing could happen to anyone in a place like Chufnell Regis.
Don't you believe it, sir. Chufnell Regis is going down. I would never have thought to have seen a troop of nigger minstrels singing comic songs within a stone's throw of my police station.
You view them with concern?
There's been fowls missing, said Sergeant Vowles darkly. Several fowls, and I have my suspicions. Well, come along, Constable. If we're to be shackled, there's nothing to keep us here. Good night, sir.
Good night. I shut the door and buzzed back to the bedroom. Pauline was sitting up in bed more or less agog. Who was it? The constabulary. What did they want? Apparently they saw you getting in. Oh, what a lot of trouble I'm giving you, Bertie. Oh, no, only too pleased. Well, I suppose I might as well be pushing along. Are you going? In the circumstances, I replied a little frigidly, I can hardly doss on the premises. I shall withdraw to the garage. Isn't there a sofa downstairs? There is. Noah's. He brought it ashore on Mount Ararat. I shall be better off in the car. Oh, Bertie, I am giving you a lot of trouble. I softened slightly. After all, the poor girl was scarcely to be blamed for what had occurred. As Chuffy had remarked earlier in the evening, love's love. Don't you worry, old thing. We Woosters can rough it when it's a matter of giving two fond hearts a leg up. You put your little head on the pillow and curl your little pink toes up and doze off. I shall be all right. And so saying, I uncorked a kindly smile, popped off, trickled down the stairs, opened the front door, and out into the scented night. And I don't suppose I was a dozen yards from the house when a heavy hand fell on my shoulder, occasioning me both mental and physical distress, and a shadowy form said, "Gotcha!" "Ouch!" I replied. The shadowy form now revealed itself as that of Constable Dobson of the Chufnell Regis police force. He was in an apologetic vein. "I'm sure I beg your pardon, sir. I thought you was a marauder." I forced myself to be airy and affable, the young squire setting the lower orders at their ease. "Quite all right, Constable, quite all right. Just going for a stroll." "I understand, sir. Breath of air." "You've put it in a nutshell. A breath, as you astutely observe, of air. The house is quite close." "Yes, sir, just over there." "I mean stuffy." "Oh, yes, sir. Well, good night, sir. Tra-la, Constable." I proceeded on my way a little shaken. I'd left the garage door open, and I felt my way to the old two-seater, glad to be alone once more. In certain moods, no doubt, one would have found Constable Dobson a delightful and stimulating companion, but tonight I preferred his absence. I climbed into the car and, leaning back, endeavoured to compose myself for sleep. Now, whether I should have been able to achieve the dreamless had the conditions remained right, I can't say. The point is pretty moot. As two-seaters go, I'd always found mine fairly comfortable, but then I'd never before tried to get the 8 hours in it, and you'd be surprised at the number of knobs and protuberances which seem suddenly to sprout out of a car's upholstery when you seek to convert it into a bed. But as it happened, I wasn't given a square chance of making the test. I don't suppose I could have counted more than about a platoon and a half of sheep when a light suddenly flashed on the features and a voice instructed me to come on out of it. I sat up. "Ah, Sergeant," I said. Another awkward meeting, embarrassment on both sides. "Is that you, sir?" "Yes." "Sorry to have disturbed you, sir." "Not at all. Can't say it occurred to me that it might be you in here, sir. I thought I'd try to get a bit of sleep in the old car, Sergeant." "Yes, sir." "Such a warm night." "Just so, sir." His voice was respectful, but I couldn't conquer a suspicion that he was beginning to look a bit askance. There was something in his manner that gave me the idea that he considered Bertram eccentric. "Stuffy indoors." "Yes, sir." I often park myself in the car in the summer-time. Yes, sir. Good night, Sergeant. Good night, sir. Well, you know how it is when someone butts in on you just as you're shaping for the beauty sleep. It breaks the spell, if you know what I mean. I curled up again, but I soon saw that all efforts in the direction of the restful night in my present environment would be fruitless. I counted about 5 more medium-sized flocks, but it was no good. Steps, I realized, would have to be taken through other channels. I hadn't done a great deal of exploring in these grounds of mine, but it so happened that one morning a sharp shower had driven me to the shelter of a species of shed or outhouse down in the southwest corner of the estate, where the gardener by the day stacked his tools and flower-pots and what-not. And unless memory deceived me, there'd been in that outhouse or shed a pile of sacking on the floor. Well, you may say that sacking considered in the light of a bed isn't everybody's money, and in saying so you would be perfectly correct. But after half an hour in the seat of a Widgeon 7, even sacking begins to look pretty good to you. It may be a little hardish on the frame, and it may smell a good deal of mice and the deep-delved earth, but there remains just one point to be put forward in its favour, viz. That it enables one to stretch the limbs, and stretching the limbs was the thing I felt now that I wanted to do the most. In addition to smelling of mice and mould, the particular segment of sacking on which some 2 minutes later I was reclining had a marked aroma of by-the-day gardener, and there was a moment when I had to ask myself if the mixture wasn't a shade too rich. But these things grow on one in time, and at the end of about a quarter of an hour I was rather enjoying the blend of scents than otherwise. I can recall inflating the lungs and more or less drinking it in. At the end of about half an hour a soothing drowsiness had begun to steal over me. And at the end of about 35 minutes the door flew open, and there was the old familiar lantern shining in again. "Arr!" said Sergeant Vowles, and Constable Dobson did the same. I realized that the time had come to strike a forceful note with these two pests. I'm all for not shackling the police, but what I maintain is that if the police come dodging about a householder's garden all night, routing him out every time he's on the point of snatching a little repose, they've jolly well got to be shackled. "Yes," I said, and there was a touch of the imperious old aristocrat in my manner. "What is it now?" Constable Dobson had been saying something in a pretty self-satisfied sort of way about having seen me creeping through the darkness and tracking me like a leopard, and Sergeant Vowles, who was a man who believed in keeping nephews in their place, was remarking that he'd seen me first and had tracked me just as much like a leopard as Constable Dobson. But at these crisp words a sudden silence fell upon them. "Is that you again, sir?" inquired the sergeant in rather an awed voice. "Yes, it is, dash it. What, may I ask, is the meaning of this incessant chivying? Sleep under these conditions becomes impossible." "Very sorry, sir. It never occurred to me that it could be you." "And why not?" "Well, sleeping in a shed, sir." "You don't dispute the fact that it is my shed?" "No, sir. But it sort of seems funny." "I see nothing funny in it whatsoever." "Uncle Ted means odd, sir." "Not so much of what Uncle Ted means, and don't call me Uncle Ted." "What it sort of seemed to us, sir, was peculiar." "I can't subscribe to your opinion, Sergeant," I said stiffly. "I have a perfect right, have I not, to sleep where I please?" "Yes, sir." "Exactly. It might be the coal cellar, it might be the front door steps. It happens to be this shed. I will now thank you, Sergeant, to withdraw. At this rate I shan't drop off till daybreak." "Are you intending to remain here the rest of the night, sir?" "Certainly. Why not?" I'd got him. He was at a loss. "Well, I suppose there's no reason why you shouldn't if you want to, sir, but it seems—" "Odd," said Constable Dobson. "Peculiar," said Sergeant Vowles. "It seems peculiar, having a bed of your own, sir, if I might say so." I'd had enough of this. "I hate beds," I said curtly. "Can't stand them, never could." "Very good, sir." He paused a moment. "Quite a warm day today, sir." "Quite. My young nephew here pretty near got a touch of the sun. Didn't you, Constable?" "Ah," said Constable Dobson. "Made him come over all funny." "Indeed?" "Yes, sir. Sort of seemed to addle the brain." I endeavoured without undue brusqueness to convey to this man the idea that I didn't consider 1 in the morning a suitable time for discussing his nephew's addled brain. "You must give me all the family medical gossip another day," I said. "At the moment I wish to be alone." "Yes, sir. Good night, sir." "Good night, Sergeant." "If I might ask the question, sir, do you feel a sort of burning feeling about the temples?" "I beg your pardon?" "Does your head throb, sir?" "It's beginning to." "Ah. Well, good night, sir, again." "Good night, Sergeant." "Good night, sir." "Good night, Constable." "Good night, sir." The door closed softly. I could hear them whispering for a moment or two like a couple of specialists holding a conference outside the sick room. Then they appeared to ooze off, for all became quiet save for the lapping of the waves on the shore. And by Jove, so sedulously did these waves lap that gradually a drowsiness crept over me, and not 10 minutes after I'd made up my mind that I should never get to sleep again in this world, I was off as comfortably as a babe or suckling. It couldn't last, of course. Not in a place like Chuffnell Regis, a hamlet containing more nosy Parkers to the square foot than any other spot in England. The next thing I remember is someone joggling my arm. I sat up. There was the good old lantern once more. Now listen. I was beginning with a generous strength when the words froze on my lips. The fellow who was joggling my arm was Chuffy. Chapter 9. Lovers' Meetings. It's been well said of Bertram Wooster that he's a man who is at all times glad to see his friends, and can be relied upon to greet them with a cheery smile and a gay quip. But though in the main this is correct, I make one proviso, viz. That the conditions be right. On the present occasion, they weren't. When an old schoolmate's fiancé is roosting in your bed in a suit of your personal pyjamas, it's hard to frisk round this old schoolmate with any abandon when he suddenly appears in the immediate vicinity. I uttered, accordingly, no gay quip. I couldn't even manage the cheery smile. I just sat goggling at the man, wondering how he'd got there, how long he proposed to remain, and what the chances were of Pauline Stoker suddenly shoving her head out of the window and shouting to me to come and grapple with a mouse or something. Chuffy was bending over me with a sort of bedside manner. In the background I could see Sergeant Vowles hovering with something of the air of a trained nurse. What had become of Constable Dobson I didn't know. It seemed too jolly to think that he was dead, so I took it that he'd returned to his beat. "It's all right, Bertie," said Chuffy soothingly. "It's me, old man." "I found his lordship by the side of the arbour," explained the sergeant. I must say I chafed a bit. I saw what had happened. When you tear a lover of Chuffy's calibre from the girl of his heart, he doesn't just mix himself a final spot and turn in. He goes and stands beneath her window, and if she's on a yacht anchored out in the middle of the harbour, this can only be done, of course, by infesting the waterfront. All quite in order, no doubt, but in the present circs dashed inconvenient, to use the mildest term. And what was making me chafe was the thought that if only he'd got his parking place a bit earlier, he'd have been in a position to welcome the girl as she came ashore, thus obviating all the present awkwardness. The sergeant was worried about you, Bertie. He seemed to think your manner was strange, so he brought me along to have a look at you. Very sensible of you, Vowles. Thank you, my lord. A sound move. Thank you, my lord. You couldn't have done a wiser thing. Thank you, my lord. It was sickening to hear them. So you've got a touch of the sun, Bertie. I have not got a touch of any bally sun. Vowles thought so. Vowles is an ass. The sergeant bridled somewhat. Begging your pardon, sir. You informed me that your head throbbed, and I assumed that the brain was addled. Exactly. You must have gone slightly off your rocker, old chap, said Chuffy gently. Mustn't you, to be sleeping out here, I mean, what? Why shouldn't I sleep out here? I saw Chuffy and the sergeant exchange glances. But you've got a bedroom, old fellow. You've got a nice bedroom, haven't you? I should have thought you'd have found it so much snugger and jollier in your cosy little bedroom. The Woosters have all been pretty quick thinkers. I saw that I got to make this move of mine seem plausible. There's a spider in my bedroom. A spider, eh? Pink? Pinkish. With long legs? Fairly long legs. And hairy, I shouldn't wonder. Very hairy. The rays of the lantern were falling on Chuffy's face, and at this point I observed a subtle change come into his expression. A moment before he'd been solicitous old Dr. Chuffnell, gravely concerned about the sorely sick patient whom he'd been called in to treat. He now grinned in a most unpleasant manner, and rising drew Sergeant Vowles aside and addressed a remark to him which told me that he'd placed an entirely wrong construction on the matter. "It's all right, Sergeant. Nothing to worry about. He's simply as tight as an owl." I think he imagined he was speaking in a tactful undertone, but his words came clearly to my ears, as did the sergeant's reply. "Is that so, my lord?" said Sergeant Vowles, and his voice was the voice of a sergeant to whom all things have been made clear. "That's all that's the trouble. Completely boiled. You notice the glassy look in the eyes?" "Yes, my lord. I've seen him like this before. Once after a bump supper at Oxford he insisted that he was a mermaid and wanted to dive into the college fountain and play the harp there." "Young gents will be young gents," said Sergeant Vowles in a tolerant and broad-minded manner. "We must put him to bed." I jumped up, horror-stricken, trembling like a leaf. "I don't want to go to bed." Chuffy stroked my arm soothingly. "It's all right, Bertie, quite all right. We understand. No wonder you're frightened, beastly great spider. Enough to frighten anyone. But it's all right now. Vowles and I will come up to your room with you and kill it. You aren't scared of spiders, Vowles?" "No, my lord." "You hear that, Bertie? Vowles will stand by you. Vowles can tackle any spider. How many spiders was it you were telling me you took on in India once, Vowles?" 96, my lord." Big ones, if I remember rightly." "Whackers, my lord." "There, Bertie, you see there's nothing to be afraid of. You take this arm, Sergeant, I'll take the other. Just relax, Bertie, we'll hold you up." Looking back, I'm not certain whether I didn't do the wrong thing at this juncture. It may be that a few well-chosen words would have served me better, but you know how it is about well-chosen words. When you need them most, you can't find any. The sergeant had begun to freeze onto my left arm, and I couldn't think of a single remark, so in lieu of conversation, I punched him in the tummy and made a dash for the open spaces. Well, you can't go far at a high rate of speed in a dark shed littered with the belongings of a by-the-day gardener. I suppose there were quite half a dozen things I could have come a perler over. The one which actually caused me to take the toss was a watering can. I fell with a dull, sickening thud, and when reason returned to her throne I found I was being carried through the summer night in the direction of the house. Chuffy had got me under the arms, and Sergeant Vowles was attached to my feet, and thus linked we passed through the front door and up the stairs. It wasn't perhaps actually the Frog's March, but it was quite near enough to it to wound my amour-propre. Not that I was thinking such a frightful lot about my amour-propre at the moment. We had reached the bedroom door now, and what I was asking myself was, what would the harvest be when Chuffy opened it and noted contents? "Chuffy," I said, and I spoke earnestly, "don't go into that room." But it's no good speaking earnestly if your head's hanging down and your tongue's got tangled up with your back teeth. All that actually emerged was a sort of gargle, and Chuffy completely misunderstood it. I know," he said. "Never mind, soon be in beddy by now." I considered his manner offensive, and would have said so, but at this moment speech was, so to speak, wiped from the lips, as it were, by amazement. With a quick heave, my bearers had suddenly dumped me on the bed, and all that the frame had encountered was a blanket and pillow. Of anything in the nature of a girl in heliotrope pyjamas there was absolutely no trace. I lay there, wondering. Chuffy had found the candle and lighted it, and I was now in a position to look about me. Pauline Stoker had absolutely disappeared, leaving not a rack behind, as I remembered Jeeves saying once. Dashed odd. Chuffy was dismissing his assistant. "Thanks, Sergeant, I can manage now."
"You're sure, my lord?" "Yes, it's quite all right. He always drops off to sleep on these occasions." "Then I think I'll be going, my lord. It's a bit late for me." "Yes, pop off. Good night." "Good night, my lord." The sergeant clumped down the stairs, making enough row for 2 sergeants, and Chuffy, with something of the air of a mother brooding over a sleeping child, took off my boots. "That's my little man," he said. "Now you lie quite quiet, Bertie, and take things easy." It's a thing I've often wondered, whether I would or wouldn't have commented upon what I considered the insufferably patronizing tone in his voice as he called me his little man. I wanted to, but I saw that it would be fruitless unless I could think of something more than a little biting. And it was while I was searching in my mind for the telling phrase that the door of the hanging cupboard outside the room opened, and Pauline Stoker came strolling in as if she hadn't a care in the world. In fact, she seemed distinctly entertained. "What a night! What a night!" she said amusedly. "A close call, that, Bertie. Who were those men I heard going out?" And then she suddenly sighted Chuffy, gave a kind of gasping squeak, and the love-light came into her eyes as if somebody had pressed a switch. "Marmaduke!" she cried, and stood there staring. But, by Jove, it was the poor old schoolmate who was doing the real staring, in the truest and fullest sense of the word. I've seen starers in my time, many of them, but never one who came within a mile of putting up the performance which Chuffy did then. The eyebrows had shot up, the jaw had fallen, and the eyes were protruding from 1 to 2 inches from the parent sockets. He also appeared to be trying to say something, but in this he flopped badly. Nothing came through except a rather unpleasant whistling sound, not quite so loud as the row your radio makes when you twiddle the twiddler a bit too hard, but in other respects closely resembling it. Pauline, meanwhile, had begun to advance with the air of a woman getting together with her demon lover, and a sort of pity for the girl shot through the Wooster bosom. I mean to say, any observant outsider like myself could see so clearly that she'd got quite the wrong angle on the situation. I could read Chuffy like a book, and I knew that she was totally mistaken in what she supposed to be his emotions at this juncture. That odd noise he was making I could diagnose not as the love call which he appeared to think it, but as the stern and censorious gruffle of a man who, finding his loved one on alien premises in heliotrope pyjamas, is stricken to the core, cut to the quick, and as sore as a gumboil. But she, poor simp, being so dashed glad to behold him, had not so much as begun to suspect that he, the Cirques being what they were, might possibly not be equally glad to behold her, with the result that when, at this juncture, he stepped back and folded his arms with a bitter sneer, it was as if he jabbed her in the eye with a burnt stick. The light faded from her face, and in its stead there appeared the hurt, bewildered look of a barefoot dancer who, while halfway through the vision of Salome, steps on a tin-tack. "Marmaduke!" Chuffy unleashed another bitter sneer. "So," he said, finding speech, if you can call that speech. "What do you mean? Why are you looking like that?" I thought it about time that I put in a word. I'd risen from the bed on Pauline's entry, and for some moments had been teetering towards the door with a sort of sketchy idea of making for the great open spaces. But partly because I felt that it ill beseemed a Wooster to leg it at such a time, and partly because I had no boots on, I had decided to remain. I now intervened, coming across with the word in season. "What you want on an occasion like this, Chuffy, old man," I said, "is simple faith. The poet Tennyson tells us—" "Shut up," said Chuffy. "I don't want to hear anything from you." "Right-ho," I said, "but all the same, simple faith is better than Norman blood, and you can't get away from it." Pauline was looking a bit fogged. "Simple faith? What? Oh!" she said, abruptly signing off, and I noted that the features were suffused with a crimson blush. "Oh!" she said. The cheeks continued to glow, but now it was not the blush of modesty that hotted them up. That first "oh," I take it, had been caused by her catching sight of her pyjamaed limbs, and suddenly getting on to the equivocal nature of her position. The second one was different. It was the heart-cry of a woman who is madder than a hornet. I mean, you know how it is. A sensitive and high-spirited girl goes through the deuce of an ordeal to win through to the bloke she loves, jumping off yachts, swimming through dashed cold water, climbing into cottages and borrowing other people's pyjamas, and then, when she's come to journey's end, so to speak, and is expecting the tender smile and the whispered endearments, gets instead the lowering frown, the curled lip, the suspicious eye, and, in a word, the raspberry. And naturally she's a bit upset. "Oh!" she said, for the third time, and her teeth gave a little click, most unpleasant. "So that's what you think?" Chuffy shook his head in an impatient sort of way. "Of course I don't. You do? I don't. Yes, you do." "I don't think anything of the kind," said Chuffy. "I know that Bertie has been scrupulously correct in his behaviour throughout," I suggested. "Sleeping in the potting shed," continued Chuffy, and I must say it didn't sound half as good as my version. "That's not the point. The fact remains that in spite of being engaged to me and pretending this afternoon that you were tickled pink to be engaged to me, you're still so much in love with Bertie that you can't keep away from him. You think I don't know all about your being engaged to him in New York, but I do." "Oh, I'm not complaining," said Chuffy, looking rather like Saint Sebastian on receipt of about the 15th arrow. "You have a perfect right to love who you like." "Whom, old man?" I couldn't help saying. Jeeves has made me rather a purist in these matters. "Will you keep quiet?" Of course, of course. "You keep shoving your oar in." Sorry, shan't occur again." Chuffy, who'd been gazing at me as if he would have liked to strike me with a blunt instrument, gazed once more at Pauline, as if he would have liked to strike her with a blunt instrument. "But," he paused, "now you've made me forget what I was going to say," he said in a rather peevish manner. Pauline took the floor. She was still on the pink side, and her eyes were gleaming glitteringly. I've seen my Aunt Agatha's eyes gleam just like that when she prepared to tick me off for some fancied misdemeanour. Of the love-light, no traces remained. "Well, then, perhaps you'll listen to what I am going to say. I suppose you have no objection to my putting in a word?" "None," said Chuffy. None, I said. Pauline was beyond a question stirred to the core. I could see her toes wiggling. "In the first place, you make me sick." "Indeed?" "Yes, indeed. In the second place, I hope I shall never see you again in this world or the next." "Really?" "Yes, really. I hate you. I wish I'd never met you. I think you're a worse pig than any you've got up at that beastly house of yours." This interested me. "I didn't know you kept pigs, Chuffy." "Black Berkshires," he said absently. "Well, if that's how you—" "There's money in pigs." "Well, all right," said Chuffy. "If that's how you feel, well, all right." "You bet it's all right." "That's what I said. It's all right." "My Uncle Henry—" "Bertie," said Chuffy. "Hello?" "I don't want to hear about your Uncle Henry. I'm not interested in your Uncle Henry. It'll be all right with me if your damned Uncle Henry trips over his feet and breaks his blasted neck." "Too late, old man. He passed away 3 years ago. Pneumonia. I was only saying he kept pigs. Made a good thing of them, too. Will you stop?" "Yes, and will you," said Pauline. "Are you going to spend the night here? I wish you would leave off talking and go." "I will," said Chuffy. "Do," said Pauline. "Good night," said Chuffy. He strode to the head of the stairs. "But one last word," he said with a wide, passionate gesture. Well, I could have told the poor old chap that you can't do that sort of thing in these old-world country cottages. His knuckles hit a projecting beam, he danced in agony, overbalanced, and the next moment he was on his way to the ground floor like a sack of coals. Pauline Stoker ran to the banisters and looked over. "Are you hurt?" she cried. "Yes," yelled Chuffy. "Good!" cried Pauline. She came back into the room, and the front door slammed like the bursting of an overwrought heart. Chapter 10. Another Visitor. I drew a deepish breath. With the departure of the male half of the sketch, a certain strain seemed to have gone out of the atmosphere. Excellent companion though I'd always found him in the past, Chuffy hadn't shown himself at his chummiest during the recent scene, with the result that for some little time I'd been feeling rather like Daniel in the lion's den. Pauline was panting somewhat, not exactly snorting, but coming very near to what you might call the borderland of the snort. Her eyes were hard and bright, deeply moved. She picked up her bathing suit. "Push off, Bertie," she said. I'd been hoping for a quiet chat, in the course of which we would review the situation, touching on this point and on that, and strive to ascertain what to do for the best. But listen, I want to change. Change what? Put on my swimming suit. I couldn't follow her. Why? Because I'm going to swim. Swim? Swim. I stared. You aren't going back to the yacht. I am going back to the yacht. But I wanted to talk about Chuffy. I never wish to hear his name mentioned again. It seemed time to be the wise old mediator. "Oh, come. Well, when I say, 'oh, come,'" I explained, "I mean, surely you don't intend to give the poor blighter the permanent air on account of a trifling lover's tiff." She looked at me in rather a peculiar manner. "Would you mind repeating that? Just the last 3 words. Trifling lover's tiff?" She breathed heavily, and for a moment I experienced a return to that lion's den sensation. "I wasn't sure I'd caught them correctly," she said. "I mean to say, you get A, the girl, and B, a bloke, and stir up their generous natures, and the result is that each says lots of things she or he doesn't mean." "Oh, well, let me tell you, I meant every word I said. I told him I never wanted to speak to him again. I don't. I told him I hated him. I do. I called him a pig. He is. Now that's rummy about Chuffy's pigs. I had no notion he kept them." "Why not? Birds of a feather." There seemed nothing much more to say about pigs. "Aren't you a bit hard?" "Am I? And rather rough on Chuffy." "Am I? You wouldn't say his attitude was excusable?" "I would not." "Must have been a shock for the poor old chap. I mean, barging in and finding you here." "Bertie." "Hello? Ever been hit over the head with a chair?" "No." "Well, you soon may be." I began to see she was in a difficult mood. "Oh, well. Does that mean the same as 'oh, come'?" "No, all I was driving at was that it seems a pity. 2 loving hearts, sundered forever, bingo." "Yes." "Still, if that's the way you feel, well, that's the way you feel, what?" "Yes." We now come to this idea of swimming home. Potty, it strikes me as. There's nothing to keep me here now, is there?" "No, but the midnight swim, you're going to find it pretty cold." "And wet. I don't care." "And how are you going to get aboard?" "I'll get aboard. I can climb up by the thing they hang the anchor from. I've done it before. So you'll remove yourself and let me change?" I went out onto the landing, and presently she emerged in the bathing suit. "You needn't see me out." "Of course I will, if you're really going." "I'm going, all right." "Oh, well, if you must." Outside the front door the air seemed nippier than ever. The mere thought of plunging into the harbour gave me the shivers, but it had no effect on her. She slipped off into the darkness without a word, and I went upstairs to bed. You might have thought that after garages and potting sheds, the fact that I was in a bed would have resulted in instant slumber, but no. I couldn't get off. The more I tried, the more I found the mind turning to what you might call the tragedy in which I had so recently participated. I don't mind admitting that my heart ached for Chuffy. It also ached for Pauline. It ached for both of them. I mean to say, consider the facts. 2 thoroughly sound eggs, destined for each other, you might almost say, through all eternity, giving each other the bird like this for no reason whatsoever, really. Pitiful. Rotten. No good to man or beast. The more I thought of it, the sillier it seemed. And yet there it was. Words had passed, relations had been severed, the whole binge was irrevocably off. There's only one thing for the sympathetic bystander to do on these occasions, and I realized now that it was madness not to have done it before going to bed and attempting sleep. I slid out from between the sheets and went downstairs. The whisky bottle was in the cupboard. So was the siphon. So was the glass. I mixed myself a healing beaker and sat down. And as I did so, I observed on the table a sheet of paper. It was a note from Pauline Stoker. "Dear Bertie, you were right about it being cold. I couldn't face the swim. But there's a boat down by the landing stage. I shall row to the yacht and set it adrift. I've come back to borrow your overcoat. I didn't want to disturb you, so I climbed in through the window. I'm afraid you'll have to sacrifice the coat, as of course I shall have to throw it overboard when I get to the yacht. Sorry. P.S.
You notice the style, curt, staccato, evidence of the wounded heart and the heavy mind. I felt sorrier for her than ever, but glad she probably wasn't going to get a cold in the head. As for the coat, a careless shrug of the shoulders covered that. I didn't grudge it her, though new and silk-lined, only too pleased, about summed up my attitude in the matter. I tore up the note and returned to my spot. There's nothing like a strong W&S for calming the system. In about another quarter of an hour I was feeling so soothed that I could contemplate bed once more, this time confident that the betting was at least 8-3 that a refreshing slumber would be my portion. I rose accordingly and was just about to ankle upstairs when for the second time that night there was the dickens of a knocking on the front door. I don't know that you'd call me an irascible man. I rather think not. Ask them about me at the Drones, and they'll probably tell you that Bertram Wooster, wind and weather permitting, is, as a general rule, suavity itself. But, as I'd been compelled to show Jeeves in the matter of the banjolele, I can be pushed too far. It was with drawn brow and cold eye that I now undid the chain. I was just about ready to give Sergeant Vowles, for I assumed that it was he, the ticking off of a lifetime. "Vowles," I was preparing to say, "enough is enough. This police persecution must stop. It's monstrous and uncalled for. We are not in Russia, Vowles. There are such things, I would have you remember, Vowles, as strong letters to the Times." That, or something like it, is what I would have said to Sergeant Vowles. And what caused me to refrain was not weakness or pity, but the fact that the man attached to the knocker wasn't Vowles at all. It was J. Washburn Stoker, and he was regarding me with a sort of hard-boiled fury which, but for the fact that I'd just finished a life-giving snort and knew that his daughter Pauline was safely off the premises, would undoubtedly have tickled me up not a little. As it was, I remained tranquil. "Yes?" I said. I'd packed so much cold surprise and hauteur into the word that a lesser man might well have keeled over backwards as if hit by a bullet. J.W. Stoker took it without blinking. He pushed past me into the house, then turned and grabbed me by the shoulder. "Now then," he said. I disengaged myself coldly. I had to wriggle out of my pyjama jacket to do so, but I managed it. "I beg your pardon?" "Where's my daughter?" "Your daughter Pauline?" "I have only one daughter." "And you ask me where this one daughter is?" "I know where she is." "Then why did you ask?" "She's here." "Then give me my pyjama jacket and tell her to come in," I said. I've never actually seen a man grind his teeth, so I wouldn't care to state definitely that this is what J. Washburn Stoker did at this juncture. He may have done, he may not have done. All I can say authoritatively is that the muscles stood out on his cheeks and his jaws began to work as if he were chewing gum. It wasn't a pleasant spectacle, but thanks to the fact that I'd mixed that whiskey and splash particularly strong so as to facilitate sleep, I was enabled to endure it with fortitude and phlegm. "She's in this house," he said, continuing to grind if he was grinding. "What makes you think that?" "I'll tell you what makes me think that. I went to her stateroom half an hour ago, and it was empty." "But why on earth should you suppose she's come here?" "Because I know she's infatuated with you." "Not at all. She regards me as a sister." "I'm going to search this house." "Charge right ahead." He dashed upstairs, and I returned to my spot. Not the same spot, another one. I felt that in the circumstances a repeat was justified, and presently my visitor, who'd gone up like a lion, came down like a lamb. I suppose a parent who's barged into a comparative stranger's cottage in the small hours in search of a missing daughter feels more or less of a silly ass. I know I should, and apparently this Stoker did, for he shuffled a bit, and I could see that a lot of the steam or motive force had gone out of him. "I owe you an apology, Mr. Wooster. Don't give it a thought. I took it for granted when I found Pauline gone. Dismiss the whole thing from your mind. It might have happened to anybody, faults on both sides and so forth. You'll have a certain something before you go." It seemed to me that it would be a prudent move to detain him on the premises for as long as possible, so as to give Pauline plenty of time to get back to the old boat. But he wouldn't be tempted. His mind was evidently too occupied for spots. "It beats me where she can have gone," he said.
and you would have been astounded at the mildness and even chummy pathos with which he spoke. It was as if Bertram had been some wise old friend to whom he was bringing his little troubles. The man seemed positively punctured. A child could have played with him. I endeavoured to throw out a word of cheer. "I expect she's gone for a swim." "At this time of night?" "Girls do rummy things. And she's a curious girl. This infatuation of hers for you, for instance." This seemed to me lacking in tact, and I would have frowned slightly hadn't I remembered that I wished to disabuse him, if disabuse is what I'm driving at, of the idea that any such infatuation existed. "Correct this notion that Miss Stoker is under my fatal spell," I urged him. "She laughs herself sick at the sight of me." "I didn't get that impression this afternoon." "Oh, that just brother and sister stuff. Shan't occur again." "It had better not," he said, returning for a moment to what I might call his earlier manner. "Well, I won't keep you up, Mr. Wooster. I apologize again for making a darn fool of myself." I didn't quite slap him on the back, but I made a sort of back-slapping gesture. "Oh, not at all," I said, "not at all. I wish I had a quid for every time I've made a darn fool of myself." And on these cordial terms we parted. He went down the garden path, and I, having waited up about 10 minutes on the chance that somebody else might come paying a social call, drained my glass and popped up to bed. Something attempted, something done, had earned a night's repose, or as near as you can get to a night's repose in a place full of Stokers and Paulines and Vowleses and Chuffies and Dobsons. It wasn't long before the weary eyelids closed and I was off. It seems almost incredible, considering what the night-life of Chufnell Regis was like, but the next thing that woke me was not a girl leaping out from under the bed, her father bounding in with blood in his eye, or a police sergeant playing ragtime on the knocker, but actually the birds outside my window heralding a new day. Well, when I say heralding, it was about 10:30 of a fine summer morning, and the sunshine streaming in through the window seemed to be calling to me to get up and see what I could do to an egg, a rasher, and the good old pot of cough. I had a hasty bath and shave, and trotted down to the kitchen full of joie de vivre.